So this is Steve, and we're here with Andy. Andy is with Syngenta, and we're at the Monroeville Research Center, and we wanted to welcome you today. We appreciate your time.
Hello.
And we wanted to talk a little bit about Syngenta. What is it that you do here, or the company does here at this facility?
Well, this facility is a corn, beans, and research facility. Basically, we run trialing for those three crops, and product development, trying to develop seeds and find out which seeds are going to yield the best for the farmer. And we're looking at things that are 7 years before what the farmer will see them.
How long has this facility been here?
Since 1988. There's been a research facility here. It started out as GARST or ICI, and in 2005 Syngenta purchased Golden Harvest and GARST to complete their line of NK, Golden Harvest, and GARST. And then since then the GARST name has been dropped. So we're operating under two brands of corn and beans, and then wheat is AgriPro wheat.
And what is it that you do here?
I am more of a farm manager, though I don't really have manager in my title. I'm a research associate. I'm also their stewardship officer for the regulated trials that we do. And so I get to play on the farm and lay it out. I do a lot of the spraying, or all the spraying, and then I run a planting crew and a harvest crew when it comes time to harvest yield trials, whether it be corn, beans, or wheat. We all kind of float around. I mostly concentrate on corn, and then land management here on the home farm.
One of the things I understand that you've kind of brought to the facility here, talking about cover crops. How did you come to get involved in cover crops, become interested in them?
That's what I'm passionate about right now. I could talk about cover crops a lot. Mostly have learned it through going to other meetings and reading magazines and such, but at the facility, within research, it felt like everyone needed to be conventionally tilled, and really we were plowing with a moldboard plow a lot. And I'm not here to say a moldboard plow is bad. It has its place, but I was doing an awful lot of it, some of it just for trash control, because we had pollinating bags, tens of thousands of pollinating bags that we didn't want blowing across the countryside. So we'd plow them under when we got done. So a third of my ground was being plowed, another third of it was plowing under red clover in our wheat. Some years you had great red clover stand, some years you didn't. But in the 24 years I've been here, I implemented a 3-crop rotation, corn, beans, and wheat, and that was before we ever had wheat and beans research. But it was always better for my corn ground to have gone through 3 different crops. So just in the last 3 years, started playing with tillage radish, kind of convinced my boss to say, just give me 5 acres to play with, just let me start. And that 5 acres went straight to 30 acres the next year. This year I have 35 acres of various crops growing, and then we just planted, since the harvest year went so well, we just planted some cereal rye into my corn stalk. So I would say of the 120 acres here, maybe 5 of it doesn't have something green growing on it by the end of the year. So I'm pretty happy. I wish I did this 20 years ago. I've got stacks of data of all my soil testing that we do every year after wheat, and I know I've made improvements, but I don't think I've made 20 years of improvements. And I think in the last 3 years, on the ground that we've gotten started with, I think there's going to be some improvements now. And some of it may just be water infiltration. I need to get water out of this heavy clay and give a spot for my roots to grow. So wouldn't say I'm completely eliminated tillage, but I think cover crops are going to have its place now.
You mentioned clay soil. Is that something that's prevalent out in this area?
Very, very much so. And that's why every company like Syngenta, whether it be Monsanto or Pioneer. We are all in this lake bed area between here and Toledo, running phytophthora plots for beans. We're just heavy, consistent Hoytville, silty clay loam, and it doesn't take too far to get maybe out of it as you go to the south, but we are just in a hotbed of heavy clay, and I would say it reared its nasty head this year. Looking at crops and ground, this year flooded just probably like it did, years ago when it was just opened up. We had a lot of water standing everywhere, and where the corn was good this year, it was good, but where it was bad, it's because of flooding, because of heavy soil, can't penetrate water.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, bringing cover crops to a corporate setting, and what are some of the challenges that maybe you ran into with losses, and I'm sure that, are these challenges something that even outside of a corporate farm, just an individual, is that something that's pretty common?
Money. It's all about money, and it's hard to put a dollar amount on what advantages or where you're going to profit from it. I think I see people say more of somewhere it's got to pay for having better organic matter than, it's got to be better when you left it than when you started with it. I think any farmer would really like to say that. It's probably even harder now that people rent ground. Maybe they don't have quite the connection with something that you own. But there's a philosophy of just, you got to care. You got to care about something first. And if it's your soil, you can't just let that run down the ditch. I think you want to improve it. So corporate-wise, I had to put it on my yearly goals that say, I want to improve the ground. Here's what I want to do to start. So I gave them a small game plan. I kind of gave them a price of what I wanted to spend. And really, you can pick about any cover crop and plant it for somewhere between, if you can spend $24 to $48 an acre. I don't participate in any of the government programs, so it's all completely funded by ourselves, being a corporate business. But for the farmer, I could take their money and do a lot with it, with what the government programs are. You need to be committed to it, and you need to let it be something different. I was never able to put cover crop rye like I did this year. We just had a phenomenal weather growing right now. The ground's fit to go drive on it, so we use the strip till rig through the county and Greg Lake to put in some cereal rye. It's not growing, it's not out of the ground yet, but be real happy to show you my other crops that got planted in mid-August after wheat. There's where I'm getting the biggest benefit. So you need to be flexible. I don't think you can just say to anybody, yes, I'm going to do it, and it's always going to be done at a certain time. But you got to give what the year will give you. And I know a lot of guys had compacted soil from water damage this year, and who would have thought that we're going to be this dry right now? Now they might be thinking of doing tillage. Well, go for it, but you could also go for maybe planting a cover crop. This might be a great year to have tried it.
So soil sounds to me, and I'm just a layman here, but it sounds to me almost like soil can be pretty much the same from year to year, but the variables are the weather and the growing season. Am I kind of right on that, or am I completely wrong?
It can just be a beast sometimes, and sometimes you just need to wait a day and everything will be great. But I think you have to farm by the seat of your pants someday, and I wish sometimes maybe guys didn't have thousands of acres to get across. This year was the year to be aggressive. If you farm wet, you hope it stays wet all year. It paid out, but we may have other consequences of tractor tracks and ruts that we did in the spring. It's weather. It's rain. The expression has always been a dry year will scare you to death, and a wet year will starve you to death. And I've heard that so many times this year. we're having a wet year, or we did at the beginning, and there's some pretty poor yields out there, and there's some really good yields out there if you just hit it just right. There just wasn't very many days to hit it right this year.
What types of species are you using as far as the cover crops go?
Radish is probably king, the easiest thing to work with. So I do use a lot of radish. I love the way it pokes holes in the ground. I think it brings up sulfur. Can't really prove that in soil tests yet, but I know sulfur is going to be one of our limiting factors since the coal plants started using scrubbers and not giving us all of our free acid rain. We're losing out on that. Our soils are down to the bottom of sulfur right now. I use oats. If I don't have any oats growing this year, but I've used oats in the past. It's just the easiest thing because you get a good winter kill out of both radish and oats. So this year I use, I have a radish with crimson clover growing down 30-inch rows. And then since we have GPS and auto steer at the research facility, it makes it even more fun. So I just use an old 6-row planter, and then so on the 15-inch row beside it, I have kale and radish, which all the radish and the kale should winter kill, or will, and then I'll be left with 30-inch rows of crimson clover, which I plan on planting corn between it. So I'm not really worried about killing the crimson clover yet. It's pretty slow growing in the winter. They say it's pretty fast in the spring. I'll find out. It'll be my experiment. So if I have to kill it early, I will if it looks like it's getting out of hand. But otherwise I'm planning on planting corn between the clover and then killing it with the first pass of spray.
I heard you mention winter kill a couple times. What does that mean?
So a lot of crops just can't survive a winter. So here we are spending money on a crop that we'll never harvest, but you need to have goals of what you want it to do. So they're either going to smother weeds, they're going to scavenge nitrogen, or it's going to, open up the soil like the radish might do, or even pull up nutrients and stabilize them in the top. So a winter kill is basically something that's going to grow big and leafy. It's going to cover the ground. I have virtually no weeds. There's no chickweed growing and anything like that, this fall because I've smothered it already with another crop. But winter kill, as soon as it gets to freezing, good heavy frost or freeze a couple days in a row, radishes and the kale should just wilt right down and they'll be gone by spring. They'll be completely rotted down, and those big leaves though have still covered the ground for a very large portion of from August when wheat came off in July. I started planting in August, so I've been smothering weeds all year long, so I plan to do that clear to spring.
Is that one of the challenges with cover crops and convincing someone to try them, that you're planting something that you're not going to see any money out of,
Yeah.
and yet you're putting time into it?
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Again, I think you have to care about something first to make the decision to do it, because you're going to spend $25 an acre if it's out of your own cash, and you may have to maybe convert some equipment. I use a John Deere 6-row planter, put on some Kinsey brush meters so I could do all this in rows. So I'm not spending near as much money as if you just go out and broadcast and spin spread and disc it in or something like that. But yeah, it takes time. I could plant my 35 acres in a day, but I'm just 35 acres. If you're out trying to do hundreds, your money starts to add up, and it's money that you need to put towards the investment of fertilizer. If you knew you could skimp on a little fertilizer somewhere, pull $25 out of it somewhere and try it.
And if you've been doing cover crops religiously and you've had some good drainage going on because of the cover crops, is that beneficial in a year like we just are finishing up here, that we've had one of the wettest summers ever? I
know water for everybody became very limiting factor that it just flooded out everybody. But I think this spring, when I planted and when it came out of the ground, I'd have to look, I think it was May 6th I got planted. I thought that I was doing better than everybody else because I had these nice holes in the ground. I planted it stale seed bed into my radish and oats cover. I thought I was going to be free and clear and really make it out, but suddenly too much water was too much for everybody. But I think I made it a lot farther than some of the crops did. I know I had water leaving my field faster than other fields that I saw. So I think it helped for a long time, and I wish we wouldn't have got those last couple rains. I would have been a little better off. But yields overall, you know, the high end of the field, which is only a couple inches higher than the low end, we took off corn in for yield trials, and first field was averaging in the about 189, and it slowly went about 10 bushels less as we migrated, you know, 60 rows over. By the time we finished, we were around 150 on the low end of the field. So I think we're still going to average at a respectable 165 for the year. And I know some of the corn in there. Well, obviously all of the corn is experimental, and that's our job, is to find the duds and find the good ones. So I had corn from 260 down to 60. So 60 wasn't the corn's fault; it was the water fault.
Do you think that that's maybe something that can skew the yields from cover crops? You're looking at some experimental things that may or may not pan out. I mean, is that gonna?
Yeah, this was a tough year for data on this farm. If it was all one crop, I would have gotten better knowledge of what my cover crops did. But we definitely found the holes, the water holes in the field. I mean, everybody did this year. But it was a good start, and I planted probably a day ahead of what I should have, and I think everybody who needed to get out and start all started. I wish I could have waited one more day, but it turned out I really worked every day I could last year. There was a day we could have planted, there was a day we could have sprayed, and luckily I got my nitrogen on Memorial Day weekend when corn was 2 or 3 inches tall, and that was the last day we could have been in the field. So I lucked out. I didn't have thousands of acres to do, but I lucked out.
Sure. What's your goal here at the research farm? I know you've increased from, I think you said 5 acres up to, you went to 30 the next time. What's your overall goal with cover crops here?
I will always be planting a cover crop after wheat, just to prep the ground going to corn. Corn is my main focus for yield trials. I will, times like this, I'll definitely try to get a cover crop growing in corn stubble, because that has always been no-till beans after corn stalks. Right now I've got 90% of my ground will be covered in green going into this winter. My goals are to do that every year that I can. So with wheat growing on a third of the farm and a cover crop growing on another third, I'm always going to be at least 2/3. And I think this year is going to be a bonus that I'll have nearly 100% covered in some sort of cover crop. My plan is also to reduce tillage. I do a lot of stale seed beds, so I can't say I'm completely reducing tillage. I do some fall tillage, mostly because I work in chicken litter. We haven't talked about that yet, but this year that was my only input that I needed. I didn't need lime. I didn't need any other commercial fertilizer. We put out chicken litter, and I do some tillage for that, just for the benefit of our neighbors. We'll work that in right away.
And I'm going to ask, chicken litter is?
Chicken poop.
Okay.
Smells just like it. And so it's a pretty dry product that went on this year. And so we have that spread by a local guy, and then I work that in the top and plant cover crops the next day. So really I didn't think smell was that bad this year. But if you leave it on top, I think you do lose a little bit of nitrogen can gas off of it. So just hitting it lightly will help.
I know you also mentioned limestone, and
lime strictly by soil test. If you need it, you need it. This area is predominantly needing high calcium lime, which makes sense because our pits, our stone quarries here are high magnesium lime. So everybody from Swayze, Indiana wants our high magnesium lime. Everybody from Woodburn wants Swayze lime because it's high calcium lime. So we use them, or I've actually used the Fort Wayne water filtration lime before. It's high calcium just because they're cleaning up the water source, and that's their sludge lime that comes out.
Anything else about cover crops that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
Just try it. Start simple. Use ones that maybe winter kill, so you don't have to worry about going in and spraying more chemicals in the spring. Maybe even plant an earlier variety of corn so you can get started earlier in the year. People who don't have wheat, there's a lot of guys that will fly it on or drive it on with big Heggies. Start small. Get your feet wet a little bit to see what you like and what you don't like, and before you know it, you'll be growing something that you have to kill, like crimson clover I'm trying this year, and you'll be excited about it. The earthworm population I think is way better already. I see the little holes when they're working it. My fertilizer soil tests have not required me to put on much more. I know in the past I was buying a lot, and we finally gotten there's my semi coming for my trucks, for my combines.